The Valdaran hegemony had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 300 star systems. Their ships numbered in the millions. They had crushed 47 species and forced them into slavery. They had erased 11 more from existence completely. The Valdaran were tall, elegant creatures with silver skin and eyes like polished gems. They moved with the grace of beings who had never known fear. They spoke with the confidence of gods. High Censor Thyelek stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue planet on the view screen. Earth, the humans called it. A tiny world orbiting an ordinary yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy. His scouts had discovered it 3 months ago. They reported that the dominant species had only recently developed faster than light travel. They were primitive. They were weak. They would make adequate servants. Thyelek smiled. He had done this many times before. He would descend to their world, deliver the ultimatum, and watch them tremble. Some species fought back at first. It never lasted long. The Valdaran had perfected the art of conquest over millennia. They knew exactly how much force to apply, exactly how to break a species without destroying its usefulness. His shuttle descended through the clouds. Below, he could see one of their major cities. Tall buildings of glass and steel. Primitive vehicles moving through crowded streets. Billions of these creatures lived on this single world, packed together like insects. Thyelek felt a mild disgust. The Valdaran valued space and solitude. These humans seemed to thrive in chaos. The shuttle landed before a large building that his translators identified as their central government. Human soldiers surrounded the landing zone, but they kept their distance. They held weapons that Thyelek recognized as basic projectile launchers, primitive, laughable. His personal shield could stop 1,000 of their bullets. Without flickering, he walked into the building with his guards behind him. Human leaders from every nation had gathered to meet him. They sat around a great circular table, watching him with expressions he could not quite read. Fear? Anger? Curiosity? Perhaps all three. Thyelek did not bother with introductions. He activated his translator and spoke. I am High Censor Thyelek of the Valdaran hegemony. Your world has been selected for inclusion in our empire. You will surrender all governmental authority to hegemony administrators. Your military forces will be disbanded. Your population will be assigned duties according to our needs. Resistance will result in the destruction of your major population centers. You have one of your solar cycles to accept these terms. He paused, waiting for the begging to begin. It always began here. The tears, the pleas for mercy, the desperate attempts at negotiation. Instead, an older human female stood. She had gray hair and tired eyes, but she stood straight and spoke clearly. I am Secretary General Amara Okonkwo of the United Nations. I speak for humanity. She paused. We decline your offer. Thyelek blinked. His translators must have made an error. You decline? We decline to surrender. We decline to submit. We decline to serve. The human female's voice was calm, almost casual. You may leave now. For a long moment, Thyelek could not speak. In 300 years of service to the hegemony, no species had ever simply said no. They always tried to negotiate. They always asked for time. They always showed fear. This human showed nothing. You do not understand, Thyelek said slowly. The hegemony commands fleets that could reduce your entire world to ash. We have conquered species far more advanced than yours. Your defiance is not brave. It is simply foolish. The human female smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Perhaps, she said, but it is our answer nonetheless. We will not submit. We will not serve. And if you bring your fleets to our world, we will fight. We will fight until the last human draws breath. We will make you pay for every inch of ground in blood. And when it is over, you will remember this moment and wonder if the cost was worth it." Tyaluk felt something he had not felt in centuries. A small cold sensation in his chest. He dismissed it quickly. This was not fear. This was simply surprise at their stupidity. "So be it," he said. "When the third expeditionary fleet arrives, you will learn the price of defiance." He turned and walked out. His shuttle lifted off and returned to his flagship. Within hours, he had left the Sol system behind, racing toward the nearest hegemony communication relay to summon the fleet. He did not look back at the blue planet. He did not see the activity that began the moment his ship disappeared from human sensors. Deep beneath mountains, massive doors opened. Ships that had been hidden for decades rose into the sky. Across the planet, soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment received their orders. Weapons that had been kept secret from all alien observation powered up for the first time. Humanity had known this day would come. They had detected Valderan signals decades ago. They had captured Valderan probes and taken them apart piece by piece. They had studied Valderan technology, learned its strengths, identified its weaknesses. They had built weapons specifically designed to counter it. And they had waited. Admiral Helena Vasquez stood in the command center of Earth's unified military forces. She was 52 years old. She had served in 3 wars on Earth before the unification. She had commanded the fleet that had secretly patrolled the outer solar system for 15 years, waiting for the first contact that everyone knew would come. Now it had come. And it was exactly what they had prepared for. Her officers gathered around her as she pulled up the tactical display. The holographic image showed the Sol system in perfect detail. Every asteroid, every moon, every hidden weapons platform. "The Valderan will return with a fleet," she said. "Based on our intelligence, probably 2,000 ships. They will expect us to cower. They will expect us to surrender or die quickly." She smiled. And it was the same smile that Secretary General Okonkwo had shown the alien ambassador. Cold, hard, dangerous. They have no idea what they have started. They think they know what war means. They have conquered species that ran or surrendered or broke. She looked at each of her officers in turn. But they have never fought humans. They have never fought a species that spent 10,000 years killing each other. They have never fought a species that treats war not as a last resort, but as an art form. She activated the command channel that connected to every ship, every base, every soldier in humanity's hidden fleet. They wanted a war, Admiral Vasquez said quietly. Let us show them what that word actually means. Across the solar system, humanity began to prepare. Not with fear, not with desperation, but with something the Valderan could never understand. They prepared with anticipation. Fleet Commander Sorath stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and watched his fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel. 2,000 warships dropped into normal space at the edge of the human solar system. Each ship was a masterpiece of Valderan engineering. Each carried weapons that could crack moons. Together, they represented enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. Sorath had commanded fleets for 2 centuries. He had crushed rebellions on 17 planets. He had never lost a battle. The High Censor had assured him that this campaign would be simple. A primitive species that had foolishly refused surrender. It would take a few days at most. The fleet formed into perfect formation. Valderan tactical doctrine demanded precise positioning. Each ship knew its place. Each captain knew the battle plan. They would advance toward the human homeworld, an unbreakable wall of shields and weapons. The humans would see death coming and despair. Begin the advance, Sorath commanded. The fleet moved forward. Sensors swept the space ahead. searching for enemy ships. They found nothing. The human solar system appeared empty. No defensive fleet. No orbital weapons. Just silence and darkness. Sorith frowned. Perhaps the humans had realized the hopelessness of their situation. Perhaps they were already preparing to surrender. "Continue scanning," he ordered. "They must have some defenses." Hours passed. The fleet moved deeper into the system. Still nothing. Sorith felt a small unease growing in his chest. This was wrong. Even the most primitive species put up some show of resistance. The first mine detonated against the flagship's shields. Sorith stumbled as the ship shook. Alarms screamed. On the view screen, he saw other ships surrounded by sudden explosions. Bright flashes of nuclear fire bloomed in the darkness. "Mines!" his tactical officer shouted. "Thousands of them. They were invisible to our sensors." Sorith could not believe it. The humans had built weapons that Valdaran technology could not detect. That was impossible. That should be impossible. More explosions ripped through the fleet. Ships that had never known defeat cracked and broke. Atmosphere vented into space. Escape pods tumbled away from dying vessels. In the first 5 minutes, Sorith lost 47 ships. "All stop," he commanded. "Defensive formation. Clear the mines." His fleet halted and began methodically destroying the mines they could now detect. But the damage was done. The perfect formation was broken. Ships were scattered, some damaged, all shaken-dawed, and then the humans attacked. They came from everywhere. Small ships, barely larger than fighters, streaked out from asteroid fields where they had hidden for weeks. They moved in patterns that made no sense to Valdaran tactical officers. They did not form lines. They did not advance in order. They swarmed like insects, darting in and out, striking at weak points. Valdaran weapons fired. Some human ships died in bright explosions. But for every ship destroyed, 3 more appeared. And they were not aiming at Valdaran warships. They were aiming at engines, at sensor arrays, at communication dishes. They were not trying to destroy the fleet. They were trying to cripple it. "What is this?" Sorith demanded. "This is not warfare. This is chaos." His tactical officers struggled to track the enemy movements. They are not following any known battle doctrine. Their patterns are completely random. "Nothing is random," Sorith growled. "Find the pattern. Predict their movements." But there was no pattern. The humans were not following a plan. They were improvising. Each pilot made their own decisions. Each attack came from a different angle. The Valdaran computers could not predict what the humans would do next because the humans themselves did not know until they did it. Then came the second shock. "Assay shock. Assayan." Valdaran sensor officers screamed a warning. "Ships, behind us! A human fleet is behind us." Sorith spun around. On the tactical display, he saw it. A carrier group, at least 50 ships, had appeared behind his fleet. They had not used faster-than-light travel. They had simply been there all along, running silent, drifting through the outer system on a route that no Valdaran tactician would ever consider. The route was inefficient. It had taken weeks longer than necessary. It made no tactical sense, and it had worked perfectly. The human carrier group opened fire on the Valdaran rear. Missiles and energy beams tore into ships that had not expected attack from that direction. Their shields were oriented forward. Their weapons were pointed the wrong way. By the time they turned to face this new threat, dozens more had been destroyed. Sorith felt something cold grip his heart. This was not war as he understood it. This was something else entirely. He opened a communication channel to the human forces. His translators worked quickly. "This is Fleet Commander Sorith of the Valdaran hegemony. This is not how war is conducted. There are rules. There are proper forms. Static crackled. Then a human voice replied. It belonged to a female, and she sounded almost amused. This is Admiral Helena Vasquez of the United Earth Defense Force. You are correct. This is not how war is conducted. A pause. This is how war is won. The battle raged for 6 more hours. The Valderan adapted slowly, painfully. They were not stupid. They learned to watch for ambush, to scan for hidden ships, to expect the unexpected. But every time they adjusted, the humans changed their tactics. Every lesson the Valderan learned became useless within the hour. When it was over, Sorath had lost 400 ships. He had destroyed perhaps 80 human vessels. He had not advanced a single light minute toward Earth. He gave the order to retreat. As his battered fleet limped toward the edge of the system, Sorath stared at the tactical display. The human ships did not pursue. They simply watched the Valderan go. What are they? His first officer whispered. What kind of species fights like this? Sorath had no answer. In 2 centuries of warfare, he had never seen anything like this. The humans did not fight with honor. They did not fight with discipline. They fought with something far more dangerous. They fought with creativity. And as his fleet fled into the darkness between stars, Commander Sorath realized something that turned his blood to ice. This had not been humanity's full strength. This had been a test. The humans had been probing his tactics, learning his patterns, studying his weaknesses. The next battle would be worse. He opened a channel to the Hegemony High Command. His voice shook as he made his report. We underestimated them, he said. We underestimated them badly. Send more ships. Send all the ships we have. Because if we do not crush these humans quickly, they will become something we cannot stop. Far behind him, Admiral Vasquez watched the Valderan fleet disappear. Her officers celebrated around her, but she did not smile. That was just the beginning, she said quietly. They will return with more ships, more weapons, more determination. And we need to be ready. She turned to her command staff. Analyze everything. Every tactic they used. Every weakness we found. Learn it all. Because next time, they will be prepared for our tricks. She paused, so we will need new ones. The throne citadel of Valdros Prime had stood for 10,000 years. Its towers reached toward the purple sky like silver fingers. Its halls had witnessed the rise and fall of 100 lesser empires. Within its walls, the High Council of the Hegemony had made decisions that shaped the galaxy. Now those halls echoed with anger and fear. High Censor Thialek stood before the council, his silver skin pale with shame. The report of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet's defeat had reached Valdros Prime 3 days ago. Since then, the council had debated without rest. Voices rose and fell. Accusations flew. For the first time in living memory, the hegemony had been humiliated by a species they considered primitive. This is a temporary setback, Thialek insisted. The humans caught us by surprise. It will not happen again. A temporary setback? Supreme Censor Villa's voice cracked like thunder. She was ancient, even by Valderan standards, and she had ruled the council for 3 centuries. 400 ships destroyed. A fleet in retreat. This is not a setback. This is a disaster. Send more ships, another council member urged. 50 fleets. 100. Burn their world to ash and be done with it. And what message does that send? Asked a third. That the mighty hegemony required 100 fleets to crush a single primitive world. We will appear weak. Our subject species will see cracks in our power. The argument continued. Thialek listened, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the human female who had refused his ultimatum. The calm in her eyes. The smile on her face. She had known something he did not. What had she known? A small voice spoke from the edge of the chamber. "If I may address the council." All eyes turned. An elderly Valderan stepped forward. His robes marked him as an archivist, one of the scholars who maintained the hegemony's vast historical records. His name was Malin, and he had spent his entire life studying conquered species. "You study the dead and the broken," Supreme Censor Valeth said dismissively. "What wisdom can you offer about war?" "Perhaps more than you think," Malin replied quietly. "I have studied every species the hegemony has conquered. I have analyzed their societies, their psychology, their evolution. And I have studied the humans as well, using the data our scouts collected." He moved to the center of the chamber and activated a holographic display. "Every species we have conquered shares something in common. They evolved from prey animals, herd creatures, beings whose ancestors survived by hiding, by running, by avoiding conflict. When faced with overwhelming force, their instincts tell them to submit or flee. This is why they break so easily. This is why the hegemony has never failed." He changed the display. An image of a human appeared. The humans are different. They did not evolve from prey. They evolved from predators. Their ancestors were hunters who chased larger animals across open plains until those animals collapsed from exhaustion. They developed tools not to gather food, but to kill it. They developed social bonds not to hide from danger, but to face it together. Malin looked around the chamber, meeting each council member's eyes. "We have never conquered a predator species. We have never even encountered one. The galaxy seems to favor prey evolution for intelligent life. The humans are an exception, a dangerous exception. Predators can be killed," Thielek said. "We have the numbers. We have the technology." "Yes," Malin agreed. "But consider their history." The display changed again. Images flickered across the hologram. Humans in primitive armor, fighting with swords. Humans in trenches, surrounded by mud and death. Humans in ruined cities, fighting house by house. Humans in strange suits, walking on a barren moon. The humans have been at war with each other for their entire existence as a species. They have fought over territory, resources, beliefs, and sometimes for no reason at all. They have developed weapons of terrible power and used them against their own kind. They have killed each other by the millions, by the hundreds of millions. Malin paused. And they have never stopped. Every generation develops new ways to kill. Every war teaches them new lessons. They do not see warfare as a failure of civilization. They see it as a part of their nature. They embrace it. They perfect it. Then they are savages, Valeth said. Savages can be crushed. No, Malin shook his head. They are not savages. They are something far more dangerous. They are intelligent, creative beings who have spent 10,000 years studying the art of killing each other. They treat war as we treat mathematics or poetry. They analyze it. They innovate. They improve. He pointed at the tactical display from the recent battle. Look at how they fought. They did not follow predictable patterns. They adapted in real time. They sacrificed ships and lives without hesitation if it served their strategy. They struck at our weaknesses while protecting their strengths. This is not primitive warfare. This is sophisticated, flexible, creative warfare refined over millennia of practice. The council was silent. There is more, Malin continued. I have analyzed their psychology. When humans face a threat, they do not submit. They unite. Every major advance in their civilization came during times of crisis. They set aside their differences and focus all their energy on the enemy. Right now, every human on their planet is working toward a single goal, destroying us. Supreme Censor Valeth leaned forward. What do you recommend, Archivist? Malin was quiet for a long moment. I recommend caution. I recommend study. I recommend we learn more about these creatures before we commit to a full war." He paused. "But I know the Council will not accept that recommendation. So if we must fight, we must do so with overwhelming force. Not 50 fleets. Not 100. Everything we have. We must crush them completely before they have time to adapt further. Because every day this war continues, they will grow stronger. They will learn our tactics. They will find new ways to hurt us." He looked at the image of the humans still glowing on the display. "They are not like us. They are not like anything we have faced. They are a species that has spent its entire existence preparing for exactly this kind of fight. And if we give them time—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The Council voted that night. 100 fleets would be assembled. Every available warship in the hegemony would join the campaign. It would take 6 months to gather such a force, but when it arrived at Earth, there would be no possibility of failure. On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Vasquez received the intelligence reports. Human spies had infiltrated Valderan communication networks years ago. They knew what was coming. 100 fleets, her intelligence officer said. Millions of ships. They are going to throw everything at us. Vasquez studied the numbers. The odds were overwhelming. By any rational calculation, humanity should surrender now and hope for mercy. But humans were not always rational. "Then we have 6 months to prepare," she said. "Contact every colony, every hidden base, every ally we have made among the hegemony's subject species. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2? Vasquez smiled. It was not a kind smile. "They are gathering their forces for one massive attack. They expect us to sit here and wait for them. Instead, we are going to take the war to their territory. We are going to make them fight on 100 fronts at once. We are going to show them what a species born from violence can really do." She turned to her officers. "The Valderan have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. They have forgotten what it means to truly fight for survival. They have forgotten what desperate creatures can accomplish." Her eyes hardened. "We're going to remind them." The war lasted 7 years. In the beginning, the Valderan were confident. Their fleets gathered from across the hegemony, the largest military force assembled in 10,000 years. Supreme Censor Valeth personally commanded the campaign. She would not repeat the mistakes of the first battle. She would crush humanity with such overwhelming power that no resistance would be possible. But humanity did not wait to be crushed. While the Valderan gathered their strength, human ships slipped through the darkness between stars. They were small vessels designed for stealth rather than combat. Their crews were volunteers who knew they might never return home. They carried weapons that the Valderan had never seen before. The first strike came at Kelvith Minor, a Valderan supply world. The humans did not attack with ships. They attacked with disease. Biological agents, engineered in secret laboratories, targeted the crops that fed the hegemony's fleets. Within weeks, the planet's agricultural output dropped to nothing. Millions of Valderan faced starvation. The hegemony sent ships to help. The humans were waiting. They attacked the supply convoys in hit-and-run strikes, appearing from nowhere, destroying cargo vessels, vanishing before the escort. Ships could respond. This became the pattern of the war. The humans refused to fight in ways the Valderan understood. They did not form battle lines. They did not engage in honorable combat. They struck at supply chains, communication relays, fuel depots. They made the hegemony bleed slowly, wound by wound. Fleet Commander Sorth, now leading the hegemony's defensive forces, grew to hate the humans with a passion that surprised him. They were cowards, he told himself. They refused to stand and fight. They skulked in shadows and struck at the weak. But deep in his heart, he knew the truth. The humans were not cowards. They were practical. They understood that they could not defeat the Valdaran in open battle, so they changed the nature of the battle. They turned their weakness into strength. And they were endlessly creative. Operation Ghost Fleet was humanity's masterwork of deception. 50 human ships, crewed by skeleton crews in cryogenic sleep, drifted through hegemony space for 6 months. They did not use their engines. They did not emit any signals. To Valdaran sensors, they appeared to be nothing more than asteroids or debris. Then, on a single predetermined day, they all awakened. 17 Valdaran military installations across the hegemony came under simultaneous attack. Before the Valdaran could respond, the damage was done. Shipyards burning. Weapons factories destroyed. Communication networks shattered. The hegemony tried to adapt. They spread their forces to protect more targets. This was exactly what humanity wanted. Now the Valdaran fleet was scattered, weakened, unable to concentrate for the massive assault they had planned. And humanity kept pushing. The Siege of Kethro showed the galaxy what humans were willing to sacrifice. Kethro was a fortress world, heavily defended, considered impregnable. Human marines landed anyway. They fought for 3 months in conditions that would have broken any other species. They fought in tunnels filled with poison gas. They fought in temperatures that killed unprotected flesh in minutes. They fought knowing that reinforcements might never come. When the battle ended, humanity had lost 60% of their assault force. 30,000 soldiers dead. The survivors barely had enough strength to hold what they had taken, but they did not retreat. They did not surrender. They held that world with bleeding hands and shattered bodies until relief forces arrived. The Valdaran could not understand it. How could any species accept such losses and keep fighting? How could soldiers march toward certain death and not break? Archivist Malin, now serving as an advisor to the military, tried to explain. "They are not like us," he said. "When we fight, we calculate the odds. We weigh costs against benefits. If defeat is certain, we retreat or surrender. It is logical. It is rational." He shook his head. "Humans do not think this way. They have a concept called honor. They have a concept called sacrifice. They believe that dying for a cause greater than themselves gives their lives meaning. They will march into hopeless battles not despite knowing they will die, but because of it. They believe their deaths will inspire others to keep fighting." He paused. "They also hate losing, perhaps more than they fear dying." The war ground on. Year after year. Battle after battle. The hegemony had more ships, more resources, more soldiers. But humanity had something the Valdaran did not possess. The ability to learn and change faster than any species in the galaxy. Every battle taught humanity something new. They studied Valdaran tactics, found weaknesses, developed countermeasures. What worked against them once never worked again. Meanwhile, the Valdaran were slow to adapt. Their traditions were ancient and rigid. Their commanders followed doctrines that had not changed in millennia. In the 5th year of the war, humanity began producing ships faster than the hegemony could destroy them. Hidden shipyards in asteroid belts and rogue planets churned out vessels day and night. Every human colony, every station, every outpost became a factory for war. In the 6th year, former subject species of the hegemony began to rebel. They had watched humanity fight. They had seen that the Valdaran could be hurt, could be beaten. For the first time in thousands of years, they believed freedom was possible. The hegemony, which had never faced internal rebellion, now fought on a dozen fronts, and then came the Battle of the Crimson Nebula. Admiral Vasquez had spent 3 years preparing this trap. She had sacrificed ships and soldiers in calculated defeats, making the Valdaran believe humanity was weakening. She had retreated from territory she could have held, drawing the Valdaran deeper into what they thought was a winning campaign. Fleet, Commander Sorth led 40% of the hegemony's remaining naval power into the Crimson Nebula, chasing what he believed was humanity's last major fleet. He would end this war with one decisive victory. He found the human fleet waiting, but it was not retreating. It was not running. It was positioned exactly where it wanted to be, surrounded by weapons platforms hidden in the nebula's dust clouds. The trap closed. For 12 hours, the Battle of the Crimson Nebula raged. Valderan ships exploded by the hundreds. Every direction they turned, humans were waiting. Every tactic they tried, humans had already prepared a counter. When it was over, the hegemony had lost half of its remaining fleet. Fleet Commander Sorth's flagship was a burning wreck. His last transmission, captured by human communications officers, became famous across the galaxy. It was a scream. A single question, torn from the throat of a being who had finally understood what he faced. What are you? What are you? Admiral Vasquez did not answer. She did not need to dot in the 7th year. Humanity's fleet entered Valderan space, not as raiders or saboteurs, but as conquerors. World after world fell. The hegemony's defenses crumbled. Species that had been slaves for millennia rose up and joined humanity's march. And finally, human ships appeared in orbit around Valdros Prime itself. Supreme Censor Valeth looked up at the view screen and saw death hanging in her sky. Thousands of human warships, weapons charged, ready to turn her homeworld to ash if she did not surrender. For 12,000 years, the Valderan had been the masters of the galaxy. Now they faced the choice they had given so many others: submit or die. Valeth closed her eyes. She thought of all the species her people had crushed, all the worlds they had conquered, all the suffering they had caused. Perhaps this was justice. Perhaps this was fate. Perhaps this was simply what happened when you challenged the wrong enemy. She opened a channel to the human fleet. "We surrender," she said. "The war's over." But she knew, even as she spoke the words, that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had changed. The Valderan were no longer masters. Humanity had arrived. The Great Hall of the Throne Citadel had witnessed many ceremonies over 10,000 years, coronations, victory celebrations, the surrender of conquered peoples. But it had never witnessed anything like this. High Censor Thielak walked between rows of human soldiers. His silver robes were torn and dirty. His gem-like eyes were dull with exhaustion. He moved with the slow steps of a being who had aged centuries in just 7 years. At the end of the hall, Admiral Helena Vasquez waited. She stood straight despite her own weariness. The war had taken its toll on her as well. Her hair had gone completely gray. Lines marked her face that had not been there when the conflict began. She had lost friends, colleagues, soldiers under her command. The cost of victory weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she had won. Humanity had won. Thielak reached the podium where the surrender documents waited. The same alien who had walked into the United Nations and demanded humanity's submission now stood ready to sign away his empire's power. He looked at the documents. His hand trembled. "Before I sign," he said quietly, "I must know. How did you do this?" We had ships beyond counting. Technology refined over millennia. Experience in conquest that stretched back to before your species discovered fire. Vasquez was silent for a moment. "You made a mistake," she said finally. "You looked at us and saw primitives. You saw a young species with primitive ships and primitive weapons. You calculated our strength based on what you could measure." She stepped closer. "But you could not measure what truly makes us dangerous. You could not measure 10,000 years of killing each other. You could not measure the lessons we learned in trenches and battlefields and bombed-out cities. You could not measure our creativity, our adaptability, our absolute refusal to surrender. Thyelek closed his eyes. "The archivist tried to warn us," he said. "He told us you were different. He told us you were predators. We did not listen." "No," Vasquez agreed. "You did not." She gestured to the documents. "Sign." Thyelek signed. With each stroke of the pen, 12,000 years of Valderan dominion came to an end. The hegemony would continue to exist, but reduced, humbled, forever changed. When it was done, Vasquez spoke again. "You came to our world," she said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "You demanded we submit. You gave us no choice but war. You assumed we would be easy prey, another species to crush beneath your heel." She paused. "You wanted to know what we are?" She thought of all the humans who had died in this war. Soldiers who had charged into impossible battles. Pilots who had flown suicide missions. Engineers who had worked themselves to death, building the ships that saved their species. We are the species that crawled out of caves and conquered our world through blood and fire. We are the species that split the atom and walked on our moon. We are the species that looked at the stars and saw not wonder, but challenge. She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. "You selected war, so we showed you how to fight it." She straightened and looked up at the human fleet still visible through the great windows. "Remember this lesson, Sensa. Remember it well. Tell your children and your children's children. Because if you ever threaten humanity again, if you ever try to take our freedom, if you ever make us choose between submission and war." She turned back to face him, and her eyes were hard as steel. "We will show you how to end one." Thyelek nodded slowly. There was nothing left to say. He turned and walked out of the hall, a broken being leaving the ruins of his empire's glory. The formal ceremony ended. Human soldiers began the long process of occupation and reconstruction. The galaxy watched and waited to see what humanity would do with their victory. Many expected revenge. The Valderan had conquered and enslaved dozens of species. They had destroyed entire civilizations. Surely humanity would make them pay for their crimes. But Admiral Vasquez made a different choice. "We did not fight this war to become what we fought against," she told the United Earth Council. "We fought for survival. We won. Now we must show the galaxy that we are more than just warriors." The occupation was firm but fair. Valderan war criminals were tried and punished. Reparations were paid to the species the hegemony had wronged. But there was no genocide, no mass enslavement, no burning of Valderan worlds. Some humans protested. After so much death, they wanted the Valderan to suffer. But Vasquez and the Council held firm. "We are better than that," Vasquez insisted. "We have to be." Years passed. The war faded from immediate memory into history. The hegemony, reduced but surviving, learned to exist as one power among many rather than the masters of all. The species they had enslaved found freedom and built their own nations. The galaxy became larger, more diverse, more chaotic, and more afraid of humans than ever before, because the other species had watched. They had seen what humanity could do when threatened. They had seen the creativity, the ruthlessness, the absolute determination. They understood now that this young species, so recently emerged from a single blue planet, was not to be underestimated. Trade delegations approached human space with respect. Diplomatic missions treated human representatives as equals. No one threatened humanity. No one demanded submission. 50 years after the war's end, an old woman sat in a garden on Earth. Helena Vasquez, long retired from military service, watched her great-grandchildren play among the flowers. They were born into a galaxy at peace, a galaxy where humanity walked among the stars as equals and allies rather than subjects or slaves. A young journalist had come to interview her about the war. She had told her story many times, but this reporter asked a different question. Looking back, he said, do you have any regrets? Vasquez was quiet for a long time. War is never clean, she said finally. People died. Good people, on both sides. We did things that haunt me still. I gave orders that sent young men and women to their deaths. I made choices that I cannot undo. She paused, watching a butterfly drift past. But would I do it again? Yes, without hesitation. Because the alternative was submission, slavery, the end of everything humanity could become. She looked at her great-grandchildren, laughing and playing without any knowledge of the horrors their species had faced. We survived. We won. And now these children will grow up in a galaxy where no one will ever tell them to kneel. That is worth any price I had to pay. The journalist thanked her and left. Vasquez remained in her garden as the sun set over a world that had nearly been destroyed far above her. Ships moved among the stars. Human ships sailing to distant worlds, carrying humanity's children to 1,000 new homes. They traded with aliens who had once been enemies. They explored mysteries that had been hidden for millions of years. They built, they created, they dreamed. They were no longer alone. They were no longer afraid, and the galaxy remembered the lesson humanity had taught. If you threaten a species that spent its entire existence learning to fight, you should not be surprised when they fight back. If you demand submission from predators, you should expect to be bitten. If you select war as your tool of conquest, you should be prepared for war to be turned against you. The humans had been farmers and poets, scientists and artists. They had been a young species full of hope and curiosity. But when they were pushed, when they were threatened, when they were given no choice but to fight or die, they had become something else. They had become exactly what the universe needed them to be. Survivors, victors, the species that looked at the oldest empire in the galaxy and said, "We decline," and then proved that they meant it.